Welcome to the John requests that I talk about things all request hour. He's going to randomly suggest something to me. I'm going to repeat it for you so you can hear it, and then I'm going to talk about whatever it is without any prior prompting or research other than what's already in my head. This is basically the format for you guys in the comments or whatever. Send us a message of, hey, we want to know about something, and then John just surprises me with it and we see where it goes. And if you guys like this sort of content or the subject and you want more detail on it, we can follow it up with a more detailed video explaining stuff, or just more detail of, hey, that was interesting, can I hear more about this thing, and we can maybe point you in a direction for other research that you can do or sources for this sort of thing or whatever. So I'm just going to kind of riff, and yeah, and then if you like it, then we'll give you more, and that's the idea.
What about correlation and causation?
Oh God. Oh God. Okay. I have so much to say about correlation and causation. No. I'll do a quick one here. I have so much to say about, okay, correlation versus causation is a really, really important topic to understand, not just for emergency preparedness, but for thinking in life. Understanding the difference between how something is correlated or how something is causally affected. The way you interact with most news stories that have to do with this type of person is affected by this thing because statistics said so comes from this problem. There's so many angles to attack this from. Okay, when you hear the phrase, this is correlation, not causation. Correlation is a statistic-based piece of information. Specifically, most types of correlation come from what's known as a simple linear regression. I will do a video explaining what a simple linear regression is to explain all this, but there's a type of stat that is run, and I'll show you how to run it, and I'll point you to like some videos that show you how to run them. But the idea is that you have different points on a graph, and you're looking at how closely they are related. So this is how much they correlate. There is this brilliant website called Spurious Correlations, which I don't know if I've shown you, but I will show you. I'll show, but don't look it up now because you're going to start laughing. I'll show you later. That basically takes things that have incredibly high correlation values. And when I mean high, like when you look at values of correlation, you have things that are 0 point something. A value of 1 in correlation is 100%. So the things are basically the same correlated. Anytime you have something that's higher than about a 0.4, so it's like 40% correlated, anything higher than that in social science. So if you were to compare crime to employment rate in a given district or a given housing area against others to see if crime and employment rate were correlated, and the stats on this have been run, and you might be surprised what the results are. Generally, they're not. It's very interesting. So if you were to look at that, if you got a value that was higher than 0.4, it would basically justify a lot of science. It would say, okay, we need to research this and find out what's going on. All correlation tells you is whether, it's kind of like that canary in the coal mine. It's that, okay, something is probably going on here, but I don't know what is going on here. Here's the problem with correlation specifically. Correlation doesn't tell you how the thing is related to the thing. Smoking and lung cancer have been studied extensively. Most of the data is correlative. It's not causational. So I have a question. If smoking and lung cancer, if when smoking goes up, lung cancer goes up, does smoking cause lung cancer or does lung cancer cause smoking? Because the data doesn't know the difference. And this might sound insane. I know how this sounds, but the data doesn't know the difference. It could be the case that lung cancer is caused by you smoking. It could be the case that there is some biological process that makes you predisposed to being addicted to nicotine when you get lung cancer. It is completely, like the data doesn't know the difference. It is completely possible based on statistics that lung cancer causes you to pick up smoking, and smoking has nothing to do with lung cancer in terms of causing it. This is the problem with stats. One thing that has an incredibly high, what's known as basically an R-squared value, which is the value that you look for in this. It's like the magic number, the correlation number. One thing that has an incredibly high correlation value is ice cream consumption and drowning. I have a question, several actually. Does eating ice cream cause you to drown, or does drowning cause you to eat ice cream? John is dying right now. He is trying his best not to burst out in laughter. This correlation is unbelievably strong. It was like over a 0.9, to the degree that one would have to be like a buffoon not to want to research it. Because surely we have ice cream consuming zombies walking the streets. They're both directly correlated to how hot and sunny it is outside, by the way, but it doesn't speak to the causal relationship. Okay, so that's, now Spurious Correlations, this website, which we'll provide a link to because it is hilarious. Spurious Correlations takes, once again, a whole bunch of these like absurd things, like the crop yield in a state against the length of a spelling bee final word in this certain sub-county in the given year. And you'll have a correlation level that is like 0.8. So if you want your crops to grow longer, you should make the word longer in the spelling bee 5 states over. And it's more correlated than gun crime and any other social stat. Like the correlation is like huge. It's just, it is absurd. This is the problem with correlation. Correlation is an indicator that you need to research more and little else. Let's further this though. What will often happen when you get into debates where everyone's just using correlationary data is you'll have one person that brings up a debate point with some correlation statistic, and another person brings a counter debate point with some other correlation statistic, and they're basically both arguing with garbage. And when someone comes in and says, that's correlation, not causation, they will basically say, well, this is what we got, and if you got something better, you need to justify why my conclusion isn't right. Here's the problem. Very often, and this isn't always the case because sometimes they're actually arguing with causal data as well, people will kind of jump ahead and argue that their data is saying something that it's not. It is surprisingly difficult for many people to learn to read science precisely, because science will often say something very, very specific, and saying anything outside of what it is specifically studying is imprecise and can lead to problems. So I want to caution against basically just kind of using the correlation versus causation hammer to just end every argument, because, well, everything we're talking about is pointless because it's all correlation. No. And I want to caution against kind of pushing back against that sort of, conversational hammer, because you can still have a useful conversation, but sometimes you got to kind of peel it back. So look, you have a conversation with somebody about, let's use a hot button topic in the States. Let's go way back and open up this can of worms. The correlation between crime rates and racial demographics in a district. There's a can of worms. All sorts of people can bring up that one and cause dangerous problems. Okay. If you're going to start making conclusions that the racial distribution in a living area, in a neighborhood, based on if there's more or less of a particular type of people, is going to increase or decrease crime rates, and you're not going to argue why that happens, that is problematic. Because you don't know if you could be arguing that people of a certain race are predisposed to causing crime. You could be arguing that people of a certain race are being forcibly relocated to environments that make them predisposed to committing crime because of the environments they're being put into. So you could be making a low income causing crime argument, but now you have to establish a relationship between low income and crime, and then this, and then this, and then this. You could be making 10 different arguments. But because you just said, well, these two things are correlated thus, you have no idea what argument you're making. Do you see how this can get very problematic very fast? You're not arguing causation here. You're just throwing a number out and then putting your own causation in without any evidence. If you're going to say that purple people are eating all of the salmon because the purple people in this area exist in a certain percentage and all the salmon's gone. You need to demonstrate that purple people are actually eating salmon because it could be that for whatever reason, it's not that they're eating the salmon, it's just the salmon don't want to go up that river anymore. I don't know. Like, you have to show the causation. Okay, what is causation? Causation is cause and effect. Thing happens, making thing happen. So we have this causes this to occur. You're showing the direct relationship. Causation is generally discovered through scientific method and repeat experimentation. So gravity is very causal. I can test it. I can throw a ball up in the air and then it can come down and hit the ground and I can test gravity. But let's play with gravity a bit. What if I throw a magnet at a fridge? What goes up does not necessarily come down. This messes with my, well, this doesn't always happen now, right? So when you explore causation and these sorts of relationships, you have to do very specific studies with a lot of restrictions put on them to find out this causes this. If you are going to use correlational data to argue hot button political topics like the one previously mentioned, you're talking about doing studies to show the exact way that this causes this thing. And generally, you want to be careful with some of these studies because I can guarantee you trying to explain out exactly how people can be predisposed to gun crime is a lot more complex of a study to design than throwing a ball up in the air. If that makes sense. Okay? I'm bringing these particular topics up and thing because in fairly recent history, this is being filmed at the end of the year 2025, and I have recently been bombarded with specific topics in my professional life being brought up frequently, and I don't like how sloppily some of the conversations are being had, where people are basically arguing with imprecise data. And they're arguing correlational stuff that the correlational data itself is usually fairly bad. They're usually arguing like 0.1% correlation rates, which at that point it's just like garbage. There's insufficient correlational data. And they're arguing it like it's a truth. And it's like, guys, we wouldn't even study this. There's no correlation here. What are you doing? But anyways, so causation, cause and effect. It's a completely different sort of study. If you want to talk about causation, you're not generally running a poll. You're looking at how do I make this thing happen and how do I make it so it happens every time? So I know this causes this. It's a different type of science, completely different type of conversation. I like causational data more. Now, correlation data is still important because the causation stuff is so specific, it is hard to know where to look for it. You use correlation, the statistic, to help you figure out, okay, we want to study that. There might be something there. And then you find out what the there is. You don't study smoking and lung cancer until you find out there might be a relationship there. It would never occur to you to know that we don't know that to look into smoking causing lung cancer until we look at all these people with lung cancer and then try to figure out what they have in common. And then say, well, what is there a thing that they all do? Or is there some common thread here? What is that? What does that look like? You'd have to run a pretty high level thing of what do they have similarly? Bringing up a more benign thing here, but I'm going to bring in race again because I think that there are ways to study race, for example, that are perfectly ethical and there's no issue here. Sickle cell disease and particular races, more common. Why? You notice that a certain disease shows up in a certain population more often. That's interesting, but you're only going to find that when you look at a correlational data first because you have this population, these people with this disease. What does that look like? Like, why? Let's look at all these people that have this disease. Do they have something in common? Interesting. Is there something about that makes them predisposed to it? Okay, let's study that relationship. Why does this happen? Is it something that's genetic? I think that if we were to look at, let's look at a medical condition of pregnancy. How would one come to conclude that there might be something unique among all the people that get pregnant? Well, we'd look at all the people that get pregnant and see if they have something in common. I wonder what they could have in common. We are certainly not figuring that out from causational research first. We would find out, oh, they all seem to have similar chromosome, and they all seem to have done certain behaviors that would result in that occurring. We're not doing immaculate conception here. So, I wonder if there's some correlation between the behaviors that they are participating in as human beings and the biological makeup of themselves resulting in this medical situation. Maybe we should study that and find out how the causational relationship occurs. What is it about this type of person that makes it so they're predisposed to this condition, right? This is the idea. You need the correlation to explore the causation, but you should be discussing, informing policy, debating things, generally speaking, that are causational. Now look, you can have open thought experiments about stuff that's correlational. You can explore, hey, what about this, what about this, what about this? I get that. But that's exploring and having fun and talking about ideas. This is, hey, how do we feel? This isn't making enemies and not having friends over a hard debating topic. I am not certain and fervently a believer in anything really that is purely correlational, because it's not certain. You don't know that. So, next time you look at some data, because you brought me, see, I told you, when I talk about correlation and causation, I'll go for 3 hours. I'll just keep going. Okay. So this is completely improv. He just had correlation versus causation, and I'm just going. So, but when you're thinking about, you sternly believe something, and I'm saying separate to faith, because faith is faith, fair enough. But when you have a stern belief in something being true, that is, like a fact, it's a fact that you know is a fact. Where does that fact come from? Does it come from correlational data, or does it come from causational data? If it comes from correlational data, there is a much higher chance that you may be wrong. If it comes from something causational, aha, that's interesting. Now, does it come from something causational that someone made up because trust me, bro? Or does it come from something causational that has been studied, that we can affirm and repeat, and we know that's what is causing it? Very different things. That's, so anyways, I can go on for days about this, obviously, and I've already brought up, hot button issues potentially, but I wanted to demonstrate kind of the weight of how this stuff can be very problematic for a lot of people and can bring up some, correlation versus causation is a very big topic that comes up everywhere. And, oh yeah, this is why statistics exists. By the way, if you have a really good statistics professor, they probably did this sort of correlation versus causation rant pretty early. It was probably shorter than mine. But yeah, that one definitely comes up.
You have shown this to me before, but I just want to pull up one that's really funny.
Here, let me see it and I'll read it out.
Here's the second one that comes in.
Okay, so global rice consumption has where's the R squared? Oh my dear. And the p-value is 0.1. That's at 99% confidence. That's crazy. Okay, for context here, when you run stats of things, you run things with a margin of error, so the chance the stat is wrong, basically, usually it's at 5% confidence, so the p-value will be associated with how likely the thing is just wrong. So usually you have a p-value of 0.05. This is a 0.01. So that means that they really made sure, like that is a high level of confidence. So this is big. Like this is like, wow. So this has an R squared value. So this is a 88% chance of basically relationship. It is an 0.88. Once again, the threshold for we should research and care is 0.4. So global rice consumption is 88% correlated with Google searches for I have a headache. So the more people search I have a headache on Google, the more rice people eat. Or the more rice people eat, the more they search on Google. The rice is causing headaches. Diabetes causes headaches. The rice is the source of the diabetes epidemic. The rice. It's the rice. We can eat the burgers. We can eat the gummy bears. We just have to not eat this. We have to stop the rice. We have to make, we have to protest. We have to, the rice conspiracy.